Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today and discussing retrofitting facilities for the future. I'm Jennifer Carrico with Farm Progress, and this session is being brought to you by Hog Slats. So joining us to talk about this subject are Rob Brenneman and his wife Shar own and operate Brenneman Pork in Washington, Iowa. Today, Brenneman Pork owns and operates approximately 40,000 sows, marketing roughly 1.5 million pigs per year. In 2021, Rob was elected to the National Pork Producers Board of Directors. Next, we have Alex Anderson with Seaboard Foods. Alex is the maintenance superintendent, whose current responsibilities include capital budgeting, strategic sourcing, and project management, and operation of a 21-person maintenance team located here in Iowa. On the far end there is PJ Corns. He is the director of Sow Production for JBS Live Pork in Greeley, Colorado. He is responsible for nearly 175,000 sows, boar studs, and gilt development units across the Midwest. PJ joined JBS in his current role in September of 2021. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here. We're going to go ahead and start the discussion. If you can, I guess Rob already has the microphone. Our resident pork producer here. So it seems like the housing requirements have become more of a moving target. So how do you build a flexible design so that it's you can change the layout if needed for different requirements?
Well, you start out with an open space and fill it all in. So if you've got, like when we started the present construction that we were going to do, it started out to be a crated barn, and in the mix of all that, we'd already started construction and we had a slatted building. So as long as you got a wide open space, you can kind of do whatever you want with it. So from there, when we change plans, it's like, okay, in our world, we felt that the ESF system gave the most flexibility because you could have a pin, which I believe is the up-and-coming thing, without a doubt, is that's what everybody thinks they want. I was very hesitant about it because, I thought I want to be able to individually manage the animal. And so anyway, I'm like, if we put in this pin and we put feeders in it or feed stations in it, and as long as you anticipate where that number is going to be, if it's 15 or 20 pigs or sows per station, then we build it like so. If Prop 12 comes or goes, you can just expand and contract that a little bit because it's open space.
Yeah, I think the answer's in your question somewhat. You have to have flexibility built in now. And I think, as Mr. Brenneman said, you operate that if it's a new build on a blank space, what that looks like for what you want, and maybe, working with the Jamies and the Arts of the world and the building, what's it going to look like 5 years from now? So I think we really have to look at flexibility in what we're doing, and not only flexibility now, but in the future. And, when you talk about farrowing, the free access, or the free farrowing, I should say, we're nowhere near pulling the plug on that, but it is in our thinking on what a farrowing house will look like when and if that happens.
And I'd say from our standpoint, all the experience I have is retrofitting existing facilities that are purchased. So if there's any changes need to be made, our constraints have been the existing building. So without tearing things down, adding space, we're kind of limited by the width of the building that we currently have and the length. So we have to make designs that fit into those spaces we currently have, which tends to create a lot of custom length and custom width material, which is a little inconvenient at times, but it's the space that we typically have available.
Alex, go ahead and tell us a little bit about if you're going to remodel the building, what things do you consider, and what are you looking for to make it so it will work in the program that wherever this building might be?
Okay, so in my experience, some of the things that we've tried to improve on when we're looking to remodel a space, our typical stance isn't a full let things go their whole lifespan and then a full remodel. We try to attack items as they're starting to lose their length of life. So if we have gating in a barn that's starting to go, we try to maintain the first run of gates or equipment that is starting to go on a week-to-week basis and try to not let that all lose its entire lifespan. But if we get to the point where we are going to have to completely remodel or change a situation, we try to tear into every potential gremlin that we're going to come across. I make John Boland's life very difficult sometimes because in the past we've done a poor job at potentially pulling off some wall coverings, at looking beneath equipment, at looking at problems that could come about during the project. So lately we've been trying to take a little more time, take things down to the base, look at our, the condition of all the equipment as the foundation of the building, whether that be the studs, the sill plate, all the base of the equipment, make sure everything is solid before we start to build back with something new. Don't know if that really answers the question, but we kind of try to go back as far as possible to make sure we're not going to come into a remodel and have unexpected change orders because of poor planning.
PJ, do you want to go ahead and discuss that as well?
Yeah, speaking specifically on new builds, I think, like we talked about, just the flexibility. Right now, if we talk Prop 12 to conventional open pen, we're talking 24 square foot to 18. So when you look at something like ventilation, it's a fundamental change that we might be looking at. So if you go into our new builds today, you'll look at a fan bank, and a lot of people who come to our farms will be saying, why is there not a fan there? And we found it to be, in our favor to go ahead and wire those for if something happens. So we've got the fan already wired. There's a plug there ready to go to have that flexibility like we talked about. As this moving target becomes less of a moving target, we feel like we can play off of that a lot better and a lot quicker.
Before you start that remodel, it's like Alex said, you got to make sure there's no hidden secrets behind the walls or under the slats, and because you don't want to have to. You get started, and especially today where you get started and you change direction, what you want to change to might not even be available. And so now you've tore into this building, and there it sits with no end goal. So dig in behind the scenes and find out what's going on and underneath, and then do exactly what those guys have said.
Very good. But we've heard the term Proposition 12 come up a couple times. We know that's pertaining to gestating sows currently. Do you expect any changes as far as farrowing happens, and how will you adapt to those if it does?
Want me to start? So, yeah, we heard Proposition 12 a lot. I'm on the NPPC board. I believe we're going to win that battle as far as that goes. But I think, in all honesty, that goes back to showing and sharing our story to prevent the next stupid idea from coming, because that's, we all know that sow doesn't need 24 square foot. Even though you've got it in a pen, 16, 17, 18 is more than adequate, because the rest of it's wasted space. And when you get to the farrowing crate, for example, if you take some of the crates I've seen here today, are we talking sustainability, or are we talking comfort, or what are we talking about? Because you're not going to get anything sustainable in a crate where the sow can turn around. We had that when I graduated from high school. We had a 10 by 10 pen. There's not a lot of difference, and 50% of the pigs got laid on. So I think we got to continue to share and show our story so that the next stupid thing doesn't come along. Prop 12 is okay because we can adjust down. The farrowing crate's a different story.
I'd agree. The only saving grace if farrowing space ever does change is my farms that we currently have that are tri-bar from end to end. The flexibility there will be greatly appreciated and necessary if there was to come where we had to change that space. I hope we never have to do that. But our stalls that currently are tri-bar, tri-deck, and cast, those will have to have probably tri-deck inserted in where the cast is now, just to make it the simplest transition as we can. Our plastic floor farms will probably be a bigger story. So let's hope we don't get to that point, but agree with everything Rob said as well.
Yeah, from a JBS standpoint, our stance is we listen to our customer, and our customers have asked about the free farrowing. And so when we look at new builds, when we look at a farrowing house drawing from Hog Slat or from Art over there, I mean, it's in the back of our mind. We look at that. What does that wall look like? Where are we actually laying out the farrowing house to not back us in a corner if something happens? Again, I hate to keep repeating flexibility, but that's the tone. And again, from our standpoint, working with Dr. Turner here, we're educating ourselves on it. We're looking at some models, and we're just that's where we're at right now. We want to know what that looks like, what the mortalities look like, and just be educated if and when that stupid idea comes up.
I can't share enough that we've got to continue to share our story. For every day I've got out of bed for 50 years, I'm like, how can I do better today than I did yesterday? And we're the first boots and eyes on the ground. We know what works and we know what don't work. The one thing I refuse to do is something that takes me backwards as an industry or as an operator. And taking backwards is if there's more pigs laid on or there's more sows that die, we have got to stand up for what we believe in, and instead of letting the customer call the shot, which I'll listen, but let's get ahead of that so the customer sees what we're doing. And if we show them what we're doing and they've seen it for a while, it's going to be a lot harder for them to say, well, we didn't know what you were doing, because that's where we're at today. They didn't know how and why we were doing stuff. Let's share that and show it, the good and the bad, and expose it now and be ready. And I think we'll head this stuff off because they already know what we're doing.
Right. I agree. We often say that we need to share our story. We need to be sure to share our story with the people that need to hear it, and not necessarily amongst ourselves. So next, what's one or two of the most innovative products or equipment that you have incorporated in your facilities to meet open pen gestation in the last couple of years?
Yeah, so the easy one there is, as Mr. Brenneman said, electronic sow feeding. We've adopted that, several different platforms, and we continuously educate ourselves on that. I believe the technology was a little bit ahead of us, our management curve, so we're trying to rapidly catch up on that, as we were just talking about, Fritz. But if I look at the new builds today, where we want to go, and I don't want to take it step back the IT route because I'm not an IT person, but we look at something as simple as Wi-Fi in the barns. We have Wi-Fi now. We believe the labor force probably isn't going to get better, so we got to get more efficient in our ability to use the different type of platforms that change our behaviors in the barns, how we work, how we're more efficient. Our ESF stations, we're looking at Wi-Fi in barns and paying that cost to make that happen, and we think that's a good spend on new builds.
So originally, I would not have said that the ESF was something that was intriguing or going to be good. But the more we got into it and the more we've used it to date, I'm sold on it and I really like it. You can control each individually sow, and you can do all that. And as far as another one, the technology part and the feeding of that animal, with the dual feed draw or the dual bottles to be able to blend feed and mix feed to the sow or the individual animal that you want to feed, I think has tremendous value in the future. But speaking of Wi-Fi and technology, at some point in time in our industry, they have to communicate with this, and this, because right now we've got as much technology as I think you can get in the barn, and we got some really smart people, and they're as confused as they've ever been because this doesn't talk to this. This doesn't work with that. So we might be a little ahead of that, and I think we'll get it figured out. But I think the technology to feed and the ESF today is good technology that will work.
Changing gears from the ESF, the most innovative thing that's made a difference in our system would probably be controllers and alarm systems that are remotely monitored. With a labor force that is increasingly less technical, the desire to get those techie people is so high, getting your hands on enough of them is never easy to do. So if you've got a handful of people who can remotely access many sites through remotely accessed controllers or alarm systems, you can monitor, maintain, troubleshoot, diagnose things from 4 hours away and help some of your people on the ground get to a solution faster and more efficiently with some of that technology that's out there, and I'm excited to see how those things improve over the next few years.
Let's shift to air filtering. What are some successes or failures you've seen, different kinds that you're using with the curtains and the end wall system and filters over inlets? What have you found is the best combination?
I can't personally speak to the best because I don't think our system has got there. Like I said earlier, we buy a lot of existing facilities and then we fit them to our needs. So we've probably designed filtration systems on what, John, 8, 9 different styles of barns over the last few years. We've even purchased filtered sites that the filtration capacity wasn't up to what we thought it needed to be. So we take the existing barn we have, we do our best to make the filtration and ventilation as comfortable, efficient, without spending so much capital up front and make the maintainability and cost to maintain astronomical. So we've got farms that it made more sense to do all the air through attic inlets year-round. We had some sites where we had to do the same thing, but we had to add cool cells to keep the temperature in check. We had other sites where we have minimum ventilation through attic vents and attic filters, but then our summer ventilation is tunnel through the end walls. Some of those sites we had to then pull all our ventilation from the center of the barn because we didn't have room on the pad to put our filter walls on both sides of the farm. So there's been many constraints. We've got every style and design. All of our stuff is negatively filtered right at the moment in Iowa. I think the most important thing to think when you're considering a filtration bid is just determining what your company rates the filters at. The rating on the stick is a great number that works when they come out of the box, but once you stack them with the pre-filter you plan on using, you operate them for a year, 2 years, 3 years, you need to know what kind of volume of air you're actually going to be able to feasibly pull through those filters after 2-3 years in, and then you need to determine at what point you want to spend the capital to replace those filters and what that lifespan looks like, because if you don't have that information up front, your design is not going to mean much. So we actually, against recommendations, went a little bit heavier on filter quantity to make sure we're not going to get plugged up early in the lifespan of that filter and cause us to have to replace those filters before they truly are out of life. So I think we did a fairly good job at being reasonable with that, with the space that we had available, the money we were willing to spend, and the environment we wanted to provide for the animal.
Alex and I made an agreement beforehand. I would talk about ESF, he would talk about filtration. So okay. I'll hand it over to Mr. Brenneman.
So we've been filtering for 13 years, and we started out, we got on our home farm, it was all negative, so we went up into the attic and we did it all from the attic, and nobody at that time could tell us how much the air that went in the hole here, that came up here, that came down through the hole and came out the fan, how much static pressure was there. So we learned the hard way, so we had to go back and add and back and add because it just didn't remove enough air. And so over time, every sow we have today is under a filter. And all of our gilts are under a filter, more than one. And everything, we've got one farm, a small farm that is positive pressure, and we did that because it was an older farm. We thought it'd be a good way to do the older farm. So we've got that positive and then one positive pressure on our home farm. and everything else is negative. All the new stuff we've done is negative. Back when we started the filtering, my thought was, how can we make this easy rather than having a bag hang off the end of a fan? Because that just didn't look right. So I developed what's called the filter wall, which is called the Z wall. But anyway, I spent hours and hours on it every day trying to figure out how you could make that easy. So we have the wall on the outside. You got a fan bank, or you got fans, and then you've got cool cell, fans, cool cell, and the air goes up in the attic and comes down. So over time, the critical things is enough inlets, because the filters, as you pull through, what we do just for magical numbers is 300 CFM coming in through a cool cell. Anything you rate over that, you're going to get hosed at the end, because there's going to be too much static pressure. And so the filters, we've learned also there's different filters and better filters. Right now, everything we're putting in is a MERV 15, happens to be an AF filter. And we're shooting for every inlet with 4 filters, which is 220 by 24s and 220 by 24s. And with the pre-filter on those, a MERV 15, we're giving 2,000 CFM of credit coming through that at a volume that you can actually live with, and moves a lot of air. Because Steve, how many? I mean, we went back into the farms and added. And the other thing that everybody said, doesn't matter where it goes out, it matters where it comes in. That's wrong. We have more fan banks pulling out, because what we noticed was where there was fewer fan banks, the hot air all came to there and accumulated, where we staggered them out and it was more even in the barn. But today that's going to be expensive, but we think it's worth it.
Very good. Anyone? Let's kind of stay on the thoughts of energy, and have you purchased any specific equipment with the goal of reducing energy costs, whether it be your air or electric or whatever it might be?
So on our new farm and on one of the farms in Missouri, we've started into the heat mats over the heat lights. And we were really reluctant, because we thought we needed the heat lights or heat, to attract the pig to there. But the heat mats use half the power, and I got to admit, I'm sold on it today. And if I could sell my daughter-in-law Erin on it, which I don't know if she's out there or not, then anybody would, then you can sell anybody. And she said that was the dumbest thing you ever did, Pops, by putting those in. I said, Erin, give it time. And now today she would say that was a good thing. And that's half the energy used. But we also put a mat on both sides. And we just felt that we wanted both sides covered, because too many units I'd went in and seen the mat on one side, and the pigs are all piled up, and we try and wean 15 per sow, and that's not going to fit on one mat. That's number one. And then the controllers, and learning how to set the controllers is number 2, because there's a big difference on the energy being used and the power that's being used through that fan. Once again, the restriction through the filters will create more amps, and in turn, you try and measure. We measure that, and there's on the controllers, we have amp meters on every fan, so we can know what's overpulling and what's not. So we've tried to judge our energy by that, and we keep track of it.
I'd like to agree with Rob on the heat mats. We've got over 300,000 sows, and every farrowing crate we have has heat mats. It's made a big impact in our system. The next thing I think is pretty important, especially as we've got cold temps outside, something that's been on my mind recently, and we've been starting to work on, is updating regulators for our heaters. So we've got a lot of heaters that are running very inefficiently. One, because either the heater's just worn out and needs replaced, it's from early 2000s, or we've got regulators that aren't pumping the right amount of gas through them. So we've had a lot of heaters running nonstop. They don't ever catch up. And realistically, in some of the conditions we found, they should have been. So we're running heaters for long, extended runs that don't have to be, and I think we're losing gas because of it. Second, with the controllers and knowing how to run them, we could definitely get our minimum ventilation corrected. We should be reacting to the weather automatically. All these things can happen the way we need them to. Using all the equipment that we currently have to its fullest potential will definitely reduce LP usage, natural gas usage, electricity usage, getting your ventilation exactly where you want it, and not using your variable fan in your system not only as your minimum up to 100%, but using it as the stage 3.5 whenever your stage 2's running and you don't quite need a full, whole another stage of fan. Use that minimum vent fan and make sure your controller's doing all those operations for you automatically. I think those are the main things I think we've done recently. Nothing groundbreaking, really.
Yeah, just we have 92 sow farms, right, Dr. Turner, give or take a few, and our contract growers, we're looking at that. We recognize the energy savings with mats, and are looking at them and looking at them rather extensively. And I think I spent the last 8 years over in Europe, and Mother's the real necessity of invention over there. Their electricity costs are anywhere between 22 and 28% higher than they are here in the U.S. So things like motion-activated lights in the barns, things like natural lighting. We have to look at that. There's the LED lighting that's definitely we see as a big one, and also from an animal standpoint. But really, that electrical savings and thinking how they do things in Europe, I think they're onto something. There's a cost there, but there's obviously going to be a return as energy costs continue to rise.
Another thing, we've got all smart heaters in our LB White smart heaters. They're variable. They're variable, and I think that how in the old days the heater kick on and boom, it's warm. Fan kick on, cool it down, on off, and the variable heaters just run at a lower rate, and then they'll gradually speed up, and it seems like it keeps it more consistent. And you get less surges, and that's definitely an energy savings. And then the other thing that's an energy savings in a way, and that is, I believe, with the Gestalt feeder that we put in the farrowing house, that's gonna, it's gonna feed that feed right, and in the G barn, it's gonna mix that feed right with the ESF. Energy from trucking feed, energy from making feed, energy from harvesting corn that gets made into feed and it gets down into the pit because it's going to manage that better. I think that quote is energy savings.
Let's move to another growing problem, which is labor shortage. So are there any technologies or equipment, and some of you have touched on it a little bit with the remote, being able to monitor things remotely, but what are some of the technologies and equipment that you have or you are considering adding to address the labor shortage concern?
Yeah, we've talked about those, the real-time controllers, us being able to control them from wherever we're at. That's definitely a plus. Our genetic partners, if they're out there, one of the big things they don't like to see is the action track hose that we have for removing dead animals. That's been a huge savings to us. We calculate out, we spend 44 man-hours per 10,000 sows removing dead, and the ability to have those things move dead out for us has been a huge, really for our employees. They thank us. And I think if we look at things in today's labor market, it's also about retaining the folks that we have. So the thing that I've really stressed as we look at new builds is something like the office. It used to be, office was, you shower in, you got a chair, and you sit down and you go out and work. But I think we really need to look at those things. So, things like a active area for training, the right kind of lights, the right setup, post-COVID, and even through the pandemic, people have a higher sense of, feeling good about things when we simply have industrial washers on the site because they know they're getting hot enough, and that gives them a sense of security there. And, I think as I started to go to Asia and sit on sow farms where, we'd be in what they call a dormitory, and you'd sit there. As we look at things, as we look at where the labor market is going and the culture around that labor market, is that so far off in the future that we don't have people living on sites in nice housing on site? So I think, that's the things we got to start thinking about, because the labor market is not getting any better and is going to be drastically different 5 years from now than it is today.
From a maintenance perspective, our labor force is also being very pulled apart by industry. So my guys, I'm having trouble keeping employees on our hourly maintenance staff because they're getting offered more money to go into a factory job that's maybe a little further away, or can just offer something that we can't. I think that's pretty standard in the live operations. We try to base all of our salaries and that based on the rest of the industry and what they're kind of doing. And I feel like we're really competitive. And so the only thing I can do from my perspective would be, as we make any changes, we try to keep things as simple as possible. We talk about innovation all the time, but yet sometimes the innovative thing is to make it less prone to breaking and needing maintenance in the maintenance world. So that's always a concern. But if there's ever an opportunity for me to put a more simple, more robust piece of equipment in that's going to require less work from our people, that would require less labor, so that my current employees can maybe handle the task.
So I think on the labor side, the things we got to look at is, would I do that job that way? And so it starts for me when I shower in. If the floor is cold and the shower is cold, my day is totally ruined, and I'm not going to perform. And so every one of our farms has heated floor and has circulating water, so the minute you turn it on, you can take a good shower. And there's a backup water heater to the backup water heater, because if you take a cold shower, it's going to be a bad day, or you're not going to take a shower, period. So I think it does start. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. When you walk into that farm, that's your first impression every single day of the week. And you don't want that to be bad. Then after that, we've got to quit making everything so complicated. Well, you can't go here because of that. You got to go here, and you got to change boots. You got to change coveralls. Who in the hell wants to do that every day 5 times? I can tell you nobody. And if you think they're doing it, you better think again, because they're not, because it's not convenient. It's not easy. They can go do this. They can go to this job and do it and never have to change their clothes. So we got to think about that thing. What makes it easy? What in the office? You got a pool table. You got a foosball table. What have you got that takes it away? You got to, what have you got that gives them a reason to other just go in there and sit and look at each other? And so it starts with that. And everything in these farms, keeping the maintenance up is the biggest deal. The feed line don't work, and they're working on the feed line to feed the sows at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. What do you think the chances that job's going to be done? And then tomorrow morning you're going to walk in and the thing's a mess. And now they got a bigger disaster. Labor-saving things like this thing that counts pigs, this camera over here, that's awesome, because how many times do you go back and recount pigs, whether it's in a sow farm or whether it's in a nursery, because you can't have the count wrong, because you get at the end, somebody's got too many pigs or not enough. I don't know if you guys have used it, but the power washer, it looks like it could work, but if it takes 2 hours to set it up, you didn't accomplish anything. So all that's got to be easy. It looks like it could. A year from now, I think we'll all have more information on something like that. It's not that power washing's a bad job. It's just, are the hoses hanging up when you walk into the room, or do you have to walk clear back over here and get them? Is the disinfectant back there, or is it in front of the room? Think about it. If I want to do it efficiently and fast, I want everything ready to go. I don't want to go messing around looking for stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think when we look at technology, like you said, we can't make it too complex. A lot of the first power washers that came out, we forgot the water lines were in the way, so things like that. So I think that goes in with our new builds and our retros, that we got to think about what that technology is, whether we're going to buy it or not. But if we do, we have to build around that. And yeah, that's a good one. The automatic power washers, You know, we talk about trying to be on the cutting edge, not the bleeding edge. I think the first ones that came out didn't work very well. The word is they get about 80% done. If you can set it up quickly, that's a good half person that we're saving there, that we don't have to hire and retain. So I think that's got some legs to it, but you got to have the facility built for that.
And if that power washer, for example, you know, we've got we got 8 guns. And that way, if one's not working, somebody inside isn't piddling with it to make sure it works. You just can't have automatic disappointments when you get ready to do something, because that just takes the fun and the meaning out of the job.
Very good. Thank you. What are some of the biggest mistakes a producer might make if they're considering a remodel? I know some of you haven't dealt with as many remodels, but Rob and Alex, maybe you can answer this.
Not knowing the end goal. That has been our problem a handful of times, where we thought we had an idea as to what we wanted to get out of a project, and then we swerved our goal and changed what we needed to happen. So having to make last minute changes, have to wait on equipment to be remanufactured, or just endless change orders, again, with also, like we talked about earlier, getting to the very bottom of what the structure of the building looks like before we go to build back with anything new on top. So I think our biggest problem, and really we haven't had a whole lot of experience with it, but as plans change, you need to know your end result and all the variables you're using to get there, and make sure you know all of them and you've tested all of them and have your own parameters on what you expect to get out of all that different equipment.
Yeah, have the end in mind resonates, because today, Art, we know what happens if you change your mind on a new build with the supply chain. It could knock you back 6 to 8 months. And if you got a breed project, I start getting really antsy, right? Because we got Mother Nature coming. So, yeah, we've got to have that well laid out. And I think it's, again, the flexibility. I've said that several times. What if, and are we setting this up right? And the thing I go through, because I'm probably the dumbest person in the room here, is to look at the plans, lay it out, and then in my head, I'll have it all laid out. And then with the production people, we go through, what's it take? What's the longest we got to move sows here? Does it make sense? There's nothing worse than moving sows, looking out to your right, and you see the building that you're going to. Should we put a walkway here? So I think going through those things, what's the longest we're going to move sows? How does that look? To have a good feel for that has definitely paid off. And I think going back to the new builds, what we have learned is when we bid those out, if we're bidding them out 3 ways, we'll use the same electrician in those bids so we can start that process. Because a lot of the switches are running a year now or more. So we can't slow that down through the bid process. We've got to have those people lined up to start that before we even accept bids.
So when we start a project, trust me, I never change it, and I know everything. Right, Steve? No, not at all. Because you just keep thinking as you're doing it, whose stupid idea was that? We're not going to do that, right? But I think on remodels, especially, you really got to say, is that call 653-8611? That's the guy that owns the bulldozer and the backhoe. And do I get rid of the whole thing and start over? Or do I go in and spend twice as much on this piece of shit, And so we got to be careful when we start a project. You want to know what the end result you actually want, and if you got the flexibility, you'll get there. But also you don't want to continue if you got started and it wasn't exactly what you thought or what it was going to be. And dollars on remodels, sometimes 653-8611 would have been cheaper.
Any closing comments from the 3 of you, each of you?
Thanks for having us, and thanks for sitting here and listening to us.
Yeah, the same. It's an honor to be up here talking with this group of gentlemen, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, it's been an honor to sit up here and look at Steve Frere for the last half hour. Doesn't get any better than that, being as I've seen him for the last 9 months. But I think as we move ahead with our industry, I can't tell you enough, share and show your story. That is relevant because we are the smartest people in the room when it comes to raising pigs. We know what we're doing. We know how to do it. We might have to change a few things, but I don't think we want to change the background of that we are pigman people and we know how to do it, and let's go do it right. Thanks for the time.
Yes, thank you. And you know, I can follow up by saying we always have the people that work for us and the animals at our best interest, and that's the most important part. We're trying to feed the world here. To wrap up and say, you know, flexibility, simplicity, and efficiency are all things that we need to look at with our buildings, and we certainly appreciate these three. Yep, go ahead, Rob.
I got one more thing. This new barn we've done is really cool. And I go to Instagram and follow Sow Mama. And that's my daughter-in-law, and she's doing an amazing job. But what she's representing is the industry for everybody in this room, and she's showing the world the technology and the pigmanship that can be done. Don't be afraid of that, but follow Sow Mama. It's incredible. I'm even learning from it.
Thank you, PJ, Alex, Rob, and also thank you, Hog Slat, for helping us put this together. Have a great day, everyone.